Hello. Today I'll be talking about the Wishbone episodes that incorporated Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott and The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. Um, the first one is Ivanhoe, and that's another, like the Odyssey, that I might have read by now had I been able to travel and visit my parents and grab that book from off my bookshelf up there. Um, but uh, but maybe not because I've had it for a long time. It's been recommended to me to read for a long time, and I still haven't. Um, and uh, that actually made a difference in the episode, and it made me consider and really think about how the literature is treated in the various Wishbone episodes in a different way than I normally would. For one thing, I at the beginning of and the episode is called "Sniffing the Gauntlet." At the beginning of the episode, when Wishbone first dives into telling the story of Ivanhoe and not the spelling bee story that the real kids are going through, um, the way that the Wishbone's narration gets us to where the first action that we see is, just made me think, I wonder, some of these books, like Don Quixote or the Odysseys, many, many pages. Hunchback of Notre Dame is it's about 400 or so. But some of these stories are incredibly long, and the episodes of Wishbone are 25 minutes long, and they are half the literature, half the Joe and the real kids. So it just made me just wonder about that process. I'm curious about that process. Who those, I guess I can look up who the writers were, but what they went through, how they handled it. If they, had already read, if they used synopses, or if they all read all of the books before they adapted, or if they read the short ones and they used synopses for the longer ones. And just what that process was. If anyone knows about that process, I would be interested that the Wishbone writers went through to adapt these things into shorter pieces. And it also made me just think, how well did I grasp the stories when I first saw these as a kid? Because I remember getting, understanding Frankenstein and Phantom of the Opera and Hunchback pretty well. And even Don Quixote for what was represented. But I was watching Ivanhoe, and I haven't read it, but I am an adult, and I am significantly older than the people this was aimed at, and I didn't really follow it or care about the characters in Ivanhoe like I care about now. I'm just seeing them in this one episode, and of course I care about Ellen, Joe, Sam, and David, and Wishbone more than characters in the hastily told version of the medieval kingdom story. But again, I Don Quixote, I could I got to know and care about in the Wishbone episode when I was a kid. The Phantom, Christine, Frankenstein's monster, and Frankenstein himself. So I wonder how often that will happen with stories that I haven't read since I was a kid, or if I will get them and understand them less than I did when I was a kid, because they're made for kids, and maybe kids get it better than I would. I don't know, but it just made me think about that in a different way. So to the episode itself about Ivanhoe, it is to do with a spelling bee. The poetry teacher, the English teacher, divides his class up into two teams. One team has Sam, David, and Joe, and Sam becomes the captain of the team. She is apparently the best speller. It comes down to her and David on the one side, and then two spellers on the other side, and there's a girl bully type person who ultimately, they shake hands at the end of the competition, but she's very competitive and a little mean. But so that's the basic setup. And David is a less confident speller. He says himself, if this were a math bee or a math league thing, he'd be good, but he's less confident as a speller. and Sam is a very confident speller, and Joe gets out on a word. I forget what the word is, but it was synagogue. Synagogue was the word. He just leaves out the U at the end. But that's beside the point. I was in a spelling bee in third, fourth, or fifth grade. I don't remember exactly. Probably fourth or fifth. And I was the fourth from the last person to get a word wrong. And the person after me also got their word wrong. So if I had gotten the word right, I would have at least gotten third place. And the word was scholar, and I have never spelled it wrong since. But I left out the H, I think, is what the, or maybe I had an E instead of an A, but I'm pretty sure it was the H in scholar. It hasn't affected me. Anyway, and here's another just thing that made me think. Now, I'm not an allergist. I am merely allergic. So I have a working knowledge of allergies and how to deal with them and how they affect me, but I'm not an expert. I would like to be an expert. And so that's another thing if you have information, I want to, like, I've been tempted to just read the Wikipedia entry on allergies, but they're much more complicated than that. So I'm looking for like the definitive book on allergies. And if you know what that book is, please comment and let me know. Because I'd like to, I don't consider myself a scientist or a medical type person. I wouldn't trust myself to be, but I feel like I should know more about how allergies work. Maybe asthma too, but that seems a bit more black and white. But Sam apparently has allergies to coconuts. And this is why it falls to David, the less confident speller, to represent their team at the end in part 2 of the spelling bee. This, I guess, has something to do with Ivanhoe. I didn't quite catch that, but it's about, I guess Ivanhoe is about being brave, being a brave knight warrior, fighting for the woman who can't fight for herself, which in Ivanhoe she literally couldn't fight for herself. In Wishbone, because it's Sam, she had to be taken out by a coconut allergy. And she wasn't taken out. It wasn't that severe, although it did happen in a weird way. And again, I'm not no expert, but food allergies, from my experience and my understanding, the danger of them is anaphylaxis, but on a less serious level, just slight swelling of the throat. And when Sam ingests the coconut, nothing happens until she realizes that the coconut is part of the protein bar that David has given her, which is again not how allergies work. It's not whether you know you've ingested something you're allergic to. It's otherwise I wouldn't be allergic to apples, because the first time I had an allergic reaction to apples, I didn't know I was going to have an allergic reaction to apples. It just happened. But she describes that the things that happen are she breaks out in hives, her nose starts running, and a couple other things. But she didn't describe the throat swelling up. She didn't describe the threat of anaphylaxis. So it seemed like we're not going to scare the kids watching, and we're not going to put the makeup on her in between shots within the same scene to get her, and she just sneezes. That's the indication that she's had an allergic reaction. It didn't ring true to me. But again, I'm not an expert, but it didn't ring true. And the next day, when Sam and David, Joe and David are going to arrive to get her and go to school, she's speaking with a huskier voice, and so it does seem that something happened in her throat. But and she's staying home for it, and it's hours later. And did she not take Benadryl? Did they not have an EpiPen? It didn't seem to me to be an accurate depiction of how allergies might sideline a person. But again, I'm not an expert. That's just something that if I'm wrong, tell me in the comments. Let's see. Anything else that I wanted to say about this one? Let's see. Everyone is a good sport in the end, including the apparently. Oh, I just one I like to talk about the dog performance. There are several because it's about knights facing off against each other. Ivanhoe. Um, Several people yell threateningly at Wishbone, and there's a shot of one guy doing this, and Wishbone is not in the shot, and then they cut to the dog acting all afraid or whatever. And I just thought, I wonder if there's probably no dog when he's looking down and yelling ostensibly at the Wishbone character. There's probably no dog there because what's the point in having the dog there? And also, it would probably scare the dog. So that's just something that I noticed. I thought that I wonder if there's like if he was just supposed to imagine the dog, or if they put a little stuffed Wishbone like I've got down there, and he was yelling at a stuffed animal. I wonder what that set was like. Um, so yeah, I'll move on now to The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I have read. I read this copy. It doesn't feel like I guess it's a I don't know. It looks nicer than it feels, but it looks nice enough. It's one of my decorative books, and and I really liked it. I just reread my blog post. I'll put that in the comments, not in the comments, in the description. Um, Much like the Disney version, it's not the whole book. It wouldn't be the whole book, but it's not. It's the parts taken out are the more unsettling parts. Um, but yeah, I think it actually is more accurate than the Disney version, except for the thing they do a weird thing. Quasimodo, the Hunchback, is deaf because of the bells that he rings, and but he also loves the bells dearly. He names them, he takes care of them, he considers them his family in the book. Uh, I guess in the Disney version they superimposed those affections onto the animate gargoyles. And the gargoyle in the Wishbone version, it looks like a bloodhound, so that's a perfect little touch there. Um, in the Wishbone, when Wishbone is playing Quasimodo, it's a bit like it's a no-win situation because Wishbone has to play Quasimodo. He's the central character. He's got to play the central character. And if Wishbone is playing the central character, or if Wishbone, the whole point is that we get Wishbone's not just speaking the lines to people, but running thoughts. The dog doesn't open his mouth and speak, but the voice of Wishbone, the actor, I forget, I think it's Larry something, we need his wit to not stop just because the character is deaf. And I don't think, I think maybe he could speak a little in the book, but he doesn't really speak in the book, I don't think. But one of the characters, or one of the extras, describes Quasimodo as deaf. And when Froyo starts to communicate with Quasimodo early in the episode, he starts by signing. But then Wishbone says, I know I'm deaf and you're signing, but you've got a bit of a stutter still, as a kind of, I guess, excuse to then have Froyo start speaking, which apparently, even though Quasimodo is deaf, he can hear. Maybe he's just good at reading lips, I don't know. And then they start, for the rest of the time, they pretty much have conversation. Quasimodo speaks and is spoken to. So it was they could have gone full Disney route and just not acknowledged the deafness at all. I don't know if they were trying to have their cake and eat it too, include deaf kids as they have included homeless kids and other less represented groups in the past. I don't know what exactly was going on there, but it was weird. The real world story is that there's this kid who's part of an after-school hockey thing or something and doesn't get picked because he's clumsy on his skates and all that. And Sam decides to take him under her wing, and teach him to skate, and so that he won't be made fun of, so that he will be picked to play on a team. And that is the story. And how that story relates to Hunchback is, well, the kid is an outcast for one thing, and needs to be helped. And also, when Sam, the Esmeralda figure, shows him care and affection, the other two males in her life, like Froyo and Phoebus, when Esmeralda shows the least kindness to Quasimodo, they get very jealous, and it's not suggested that they have a crush on her, although they suggest that maybe she has a crush on the kid Nathaniel. Um, but it's just the why not pay attention to me? It's much more sinister in Hunchback. It's mere jealousy, and our friend has always been with us, but now she's she's spending time with someone else, and we don't like it. It's purely childish jealousy in the real story. It's much more sinister when it's Froyo, who in violence that would embarrass a G-rated Disney movie attacks people. There's just a very ridiculous attack scene that I guess what's more kid friendly than a G rating? That's the kind of violence in the Hunchback portion of the Wishbone episode. Let's see, the Hound Gargoyle. I mentioned that. Let's see, the Wishbone just commenting on why are humans on wheels at the beginning for a couple minutes is very funny. This episode is the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Not the most, I don't know what sniffing the gauntlet means, but the Hunchback of Notre Dame is not the most interesting of these titles. Like it's not like Cyrano's. Let's see. Wishbone goes to investigate Joe and David's concerns, sneaking into Sam's house, but she knows that he's there, and I guess he's a welcome guest all the time. And he announces himself, not that they understand him, but he announces himself as a chaperone, Wishbone chaperone service. Sam and Nathaniel talk about their experiences being children of divorce, and that's a bond that they have. That I guess it's good for Sam to have someone like that. And Joe doesn't have a father, but it's because his father died, and I think David has both parents, and they're both right there with him. And let's see, just a couple more things. The resolution of the story has to do with the revelation that Nathaniel would make a good goalie. He can catch things, and this is revealed through the Glass Menagerie. Briefly, this Wishbone episode becomes not the Hunchback of Notre Dame, but the Glass Menagerie. But then Nathaniel literally saves it from becoming the Glass Menagerie because Sam has a little glass unicorn that her parents gave her before they divorced that she treasures. And Wishbone gets on a skateboard, Sam's skateboard, and skateboards through the house and knocks into her, and she does that dramatic thing where she doesn't drop the thing, but she kind of throws it into the air, and Nathaniel dives and catches it, and so the glass unicorn does not shatter, which means it's not the Glass Menagerie. It's still the Hunchback of Notre Dame, but still it came very close to being the Glass Menagerie. I'm not a fan of the Glass Menagerie, although it'd be interesting to see Wishbone tackle that. And then the very last thing that I wrote down, very worthy of note, is just the way that Wishbone fights when called upon to do battle in these, I guess in the real world or in the fictional world, is the dog grabs the pant leg. I guess maybe there's dog nip or something. I don't know how they get dogs to do that. And then just kind of tears at the pant leg of whoever is supposed to be attacking, and it's very effective. Maybe more people should fight that way. So that's the Hunchback of Notre Dame and Ivanhoe. And let's see, the next couple of episodes are Silas Marner. I have no idea. I've never read that. But maybe I've learned a bit about it. Maybe I'll recognize it from something. And A Tale of Two Cities, which I have read. So those will be next week. It's been a weird time. This is a distraction for me, and I hope it can be a distraction for other people. Not that we should stay distracted, but we also can't dwell on the bad news. So I hope it's been a distraction. The stories are over for this video, but between now and the next one, let's wag another tail.